Hello, I'm Gary Quinn, and welcome to another episode of Ready, Set, Live. In life, we have to start setting healthy boundaries. That is through our minds, through our energy, through our vocabulary in everyday living. My guest today is a vinyasa teacher of yoga. He is also a wellness coach, Colin Kim. Stay tuned, we'll be right back. Welcome to the show, Colin. It's so great to have you. Thank you for coming in studio.
It's good to be with you, Gary.
You know, Colin, I've followed your work for years, and you impressed me in being such a knowledgeable teacher, but also full of wisdom. What was this catalyst that started? Because I see every year you just have more and more great insight.
Well, I really thank you for that. You know, maybe not unlike a lot of people, felt like I had a lot to overcome in childhood and my adolescence. I think a lot of that was self-imposed, maybe my own experience or personality and how I feel I was experiencing the world. And, you know, what it's turned into now, and I've made a career and friendships out of it, is, you know, there's a lot of concepts that work really well in the healing arts, but they can take a lot of time to learn, and a lot of them require self-reflection, which can be really challenging. So what I've kind of worked on in helping people is kind of almost an irreverent way of approaching, a fun way to approach concepts that can be really challenging, asked us to do a lot of personal work, and then revealing that truth to the person or the group of people that are sitting in front of me.
During this lockdown, did you find there was something you could not live with or that you couldn't do without?
That's a really good question. It's validation for me. I've been teaching fitness here in Los Angeles and traveling to conferences around the world to speak and also teach principally yoga and also spin on occasion, cycling. I think I've taught more spin classes than anybody on earth.
I know.
Probably up near 5,000 spin classes.
And I've taken the classes. He's amazing.
Yeah. You know, working out is such a good friend. It never lets you down. So, and the thing I learned in 21 years of teaching, which is I'm teaching 6 days a week, 10 to 13 experiences. And I had never in 21 years had more than 2 weeks break. And so to have a break like we did really had me learn about myself, the parts of myself that I use. You would think that a person that's in front of people a lot, it's this harmonious experience, but I realized that I was using my experience with people to actually deflect intimacy and relationships with my students by keeping busy all of the time.
Correct.
Being a good teacher and
Correct.
Providing. And I learned it was really high functioning, gross people pleasing.
Exactly. And you know, I believe that we all have this, let's say, school of classroom in our experience in this lifetime, but I think the honesty of intimacy of being able to share with individuals during the lockdown, it made you reflect and it made you look at yourself really deep and see what pieces you did not like about yourself and that you'd like to change, or what you don't want to change, meaning, you know, you have a choice. You can stay on pause.
Right.
Did you find that what was the biggest thing you learned during this whole pandemic of just being in solitude?
You know, there's this statement like, that's that soul in its own body making its own choices for the purpose of healing. So it's just a matter of fact, and it's not with judgment, that people are dissolving themselves either into demoting habits or promoting habits, especially as we move through our 30s and 40s, and we kind of hit that point where we're either going to do the work or we may settle into a personality, even by choice, consciously. And the
boundaries, really. We need to learn how to set boundaries, really.
We were talking about that before.
Correct.
Yeah, I actually have a hashtag for it.
Okay.
It's hashtag NMP, not my problem.
Okay.
So part of setting healthy boundaries is how quickly we can learn and identify what's not my problem. You know, I was speaking to someone who very altruistically was like, you know, I want to make everything my problem, you know, and they stated a theology or religion that they were attached to, where they wanted to be open-handed, kind of Mother Teresa. And that may be cool if you're doing the self-work to keep yourself connected to a place of giving. You know, they say to whom much is given, much is required. So when we're giving from an authentic place, we can do that. If we're giving from an inauthentic place, one of the quickest ways we'll know that we're doing that is because there's resentment. And when we feel that resentment within, it's a good idea to take a break.
And I think the resentment also causes a lot of anxiety or the stress that comes up. What do you suggest for people who during this time have realized that they actually need to forgive themselves and everyone else that they feel has harmed them?
That's a really good question. I think even rituals or miracles that are palpable that people feel that they have forgiven themselves. I think it's just part of our primate mammal nature to reflect and maybe even neurotically obsess over how we're navigating our own life. You know, I taught this TEDx talk where we were talking about resilience and trauma. And, you know, two people can experience the exact same negative experience. Mm-hmm. One person can say it's a trauma. The other person may say that it was a bad day, and they'll take everything they can from it and move on. And so the difference behind that, what makes a trauma versus a bad day is the brain has this part, we see these memes on social sometimes, it's like, oh, you had one job and you couldn't get it right. So like the job of the brain is to keep us alive. Mm. So when we bump into things that aren't good for us, that hurt our feelings or worse, mortal illness in the body, relationships that can pull us down into low-grade behavior, we go back to visit the experience on some level, and the unfortunate thing is that work happens subconsciously. So people will not understand. It's like, why am I always dating the bad guy? You know, it's cliche on purpose, right? So we repeat the behavior that we need to visit to prove to ourselves that we could have survived it, mm-hmm. quite frankly.
Well, what's interesting is that we have, repeat issues, but I look at them as learning windows for us to activate. And if you did repeat it twice, you better get it right the third time, or you will continue to do that throughout your whole lifetime. And I think the lesson is not to have judgment, not to have, what's going to happen to me in the future. It's really being present in the now. What would you say for people who can't or don't know how to be present in life?
Well, first I want to go back to the forgiveness, because these around LA, I live on Fountain, kind of in this heart of it, and you see these Star Tour buses going by, right, taking to the mansions.
Right.
That's what I call those visits back to trauma. We board these Star Tours back to our pain. And I think the forgiveness of all forgivenesses is forgiving yourself for the time that we've wasted. And is it wasted, though? Because the pain is often calculated as a leverage to frustration or depression to move forward. So nobody can rob anybody of that experience. But the forgiveness of all experiences is to become your own loving parent and to self-witness and to self-validate. And there's many tools that can do that.
Yeah. What would you say to someone who has a lot of entitlement issues? What is that really about?
Well, we met at the gym. Especially like gym social behavior in LA. LA is very optic driven, and there is a lot of entitlement. And ultimately, like if we can be short about it in the time that we have, it's coming from an inauthentic quest for power. So either passively or very forcefully, visually and physically, people are trying to manipulate to give some traction into a personal sense of literally to maybe even be acknowledged that they exist. Mm. And, Marcus Aurelius, he was famously one of the 5 kind emperors, mm-hmm. and he, the creator of the father of Stoicism. And he has a wonderful quote about worry. And I think a lot of entitlement comes from, it's like a secondary or tertiary behavior for a deep sense of worry. And, Marcus Aurelius says, you don't have to worry because you're going to be the same person when you get there. Mm-hmm. And I love that so much. And that may feel beautiful to listen to, but what the work that it's asking us to do, again, and I think I'm repeating myself here, but this is the work that I do, is to self-validate and to self-witness so that we can develop ourselves emotionally and spiritually. And the cool thing about doing that work is it brings immediate relief. Mm-hmm. That's what I see every day. I thought I was a swimmer, and I hurt my shoulder. I thought I was an actor and had quite great success with that. The thing that I love is being with people at that moment when they're able to validate themselves and say, you know what, life isn't happening to me. There's aspects of my personality that are inviting this in that may have been developed or learned or groomed in childhood. And conquering that, because we don't want to be dependents in life.
Correct.
There's this saying that the need to be appreciated is to live a beggar's life. And oftentimes we do that in our intimate relationships. We do that with sex. We do it with money and self-validation.
Yeah, I also think that just because you went down one path and it did not become what you thought it would be, and you went down a different path, that was a experience. It doesn't mean that you were unsuccessful. It just means you had to learn what you needed to learn from that. You know, I trained all my life as an Olympic swimmer. I didn't get to go to the Olympics. Okay, then what? That was the only goal I had for 22 years. So I do believe you have to switch gears and be able to activate something different within yourself, even with the choice that you say, well, this is what I know so far.
That's right.
And kind of move to the next level. What would you say for someone, Colin, that is a great person, but they seem to not want to share any deep information about themselves, or they're closed off? What would you call that? Would you say it's a fear of, if you know who I really am, you might not like me? Or what is that about?
Well, simply stated, I think it can be just easier to get along. So just to be one of many moving through space and time. And our lives can be very comfortable that way with all the streaming services. We can make our way out and make our way back in, practically invisible. And something that I use, I watch like on morning television shows, and there's always like fitness coaches and yoga teachers, and everybody's saying, meditate, chill out. So even I'm saying it today, like self-validate, And the thing is, can I share something with you?
Yeah.
Is I heard this in a seminar once, and I was trying to bring finesse to my teaching. And when you're working in spirituality, oftentimes people have bucked off the word God. So we say like, people on the street say energy, hipsters say like good vibes, it might be more like the universe. Some people prefer the word God. And if someone has bucked off the word God, we can break God down into G-O-D, this lovely acronym. So most people, if not everybody on the planet Earth, will agree that there's a generating force, G. So sperm hits egg and it's born. And not only that, but sperm doesn't hit egg and there's protons and neutrons bouncing all over the place. There's an organization to it. There's cellular division, which is why we have a mirror imprint of eyes and what we know as life. And then there's D, there's the destruction force. So things are born, things come together and organize, like the systems of the bodies and relationships. And then things also destroy and die. And this taping that we're doing right now has a GOD. Our meal has a GOD. Everything has a GOD, and there's many GODs going on at once. And the person who's godlike is the person who's graceful through all parts of the wheel. So everybody really, really loves Inception and sperm hits egg and the adrenaline rush of the roller coaster pulling back for Genesis or a new idea, the adolescence of it, spring awakening. But when we get into the O and the D, we're watching that with terrible, these long, I was reading this thing with Afghanistan that's going on. And it's not just now. This has been going on since like 400. This is like the 14th time this country has gone through this. So it's what takes the pressure off is grieving is something different than setting limitations for how you're going to navigate through pain. So grieving, yes. But evolved behavior is the person who has a relationship with themselves, understands the responses and reactions to things, so that they can remain spiritually graceful and elegant through all parts of the wheel. And nobody likes changing grandma's diaper.
Correct.
Nobody likes a relationship that we know is no longer good for us, and we have to struggle to keep it alive or to let it go. And we could go into theories about why it is the case that most of humanity has been trained away from the ability to look at the destruction or the death force in life. But I'm here to tell you that it's the way that we access grace and elegance through the wheel of time and space is through breath.
Yep. Breathing is such an important part of our lifestyle, and most people do not breathe. You know?
I wasn't when I started. I was nervous. I was like,
No, but it's interesting. Even with people who I coach, I find I make them breathe because I said, you're not breathing. So everything is from up here, but they're depleted in their brain. And I think breathing is part of our function that everybody needs to breathe. So everybody breathe right now.
yeah.
Absolutely.
I like to say inhale so big you could crack your back. And in 1980s self-help books, they'd say, like, just breathe, take a breath. And now we know through UCLA science, it's not just take a breath, clear the old exhaust out of the lungs. When we don't clear that old exhaust, it's sleep apnea, aging of the brain. So it's not just, it's really
Release.
getting all of the old air
They're
out.
out.
And whether there's a God or not, when you have your hands up in praise and worship, or you are on drugs and alcohol at Coachella or some music festival around the world, the point of the matter is dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, adrenaline is flooding into your bloodstream. And so the most important thing we'll ever learn how to do is to self-soothe. And whether we call it God or dopamine in the bloodstream and all the wonderful things that make us feel good, is having a relationship with yourself to know how to get there when you need it.
What's your definition? What does love mean to you?
It's a good question. When we did our intake interview and I was thinking about love, what a dynamic question, so simple to ask. And, I'm a different person in who I am in my journey as a teacher and a spiritual being, not just in what I give, but myself. And I was so gung-ho for soul, spirit, God, energy. And, in the yogic traditions and meditation, there's these figureheads, whether they be male or female. A lot of them have criminal behavior. We see these entities coming down like the walls of Jericho. And I used to feel that, God, energy, love. And to answer your question, Gary, I feel that it's nobility. I really feel that when we're praying to God, what we are doing is accessing the nobility that we have within inside of ourselves that comes as a birthright by being born on the planet Earth, through all of the intelligence that is neurologically wired into us, because I'm standing at the top of a pyramid of a family tree of billions of people. And there's muscle memory and soul memory into what that means. And I don't mean reincarnation. I don't even mean it that deep. I mean that when we reach out to God and when we pray, that we are taking responsibility for the nobility that resides within us. And I would never remove someone calling that for their experience God. But being a God-like person is being a noble person through the God, through all points of it.
And I think the power of prayer is really underestimated because it is so powerful that I use it all the time, but I've used it on clients who didn't believe it worked. And once we were in a little circle with 20 people and we all prayed for this to happen for this woman. And there was no way it was to happen. The lawyer said, forget it. You're never going to see that money. And 21 of us prayed at that moment and said, she will get this money, a lot of money, on a project she worked on. And within 2 weeks, this attorney who said it's never going to happen called her and said, okay, where do we send FedEx the check? And she called me and we sent an email to all the people saying, thank you for that energy, because it's almost the same thing when two or more minds are together, you're sending that frequency or that energy. So it's all in alignment, really, to everything we do. What is your biggest fear? Do you have any?
Yeah, my biggest fear is being crazy and not knowing it. like being irretrievably crazy and not having a lifeline to pull myself back.
Right.
And when you said prayer, your face turned into my grandma Winnie, who was like a 97-year-old Korean lady, and she'd always every week come over for all the religious holidays. Colin, have you heard the good news about prayer?
Right.
And the thing is, in the martial arts tradition, Aikido, Aki means everything, Dao means the now. So when you practice Aikido, you actually, when you're under threat or you need, let's say, something that you're praying for, you actually relax, which is the opposite of fight or flight. So that's the training of Aikido. When most people tense up is to relax, Because when we relax, we take in more information. The eyes relax, I can see more, I can see you sideways when I relax my eyes. So it's believed that when you are breathed, when you're centered, when you are in your least ill state, and you are aware of the everything of the now, that miracles can be performed and prayer can be directed.
Absolutely, and I
I'm a
believe
big believer of prayer.
I'm a big believer in miracles because I teach that how to speak and think in that mindset. Would you say that the power of prayer can help someone to release anxiety? Or what would be the prescription for someone who suffers from a lot of anxiety as a wellness coach also?
That's a good question. So, thank you. The idea of chakras in the body, and there's allegedly like 7 of them, they're not literal, they're esoteric, and it's like Wells Fargo, Bank of America, Chase, if I poke you in your chest, I'm gonna get a different response than if I kick you in your groin. And everything's talking about like, open the heart center, give from an authentic place. So we're stirring all this energy here. I think of it like carbonation, like in a sparkling water bottle. And what we need to do is to pop the cork. So we're often giving so much, our hands even give. And you'll notice people who often have the most anxiety are the people who have been trained to give the most. If we had the time, we could even talk about how ethnicities, there's ethnic implications of like all the nurses at Cedar Sinai are Filipino, like the Latino community with food. And I'm Korean, so everything was about, food and just intensity around certain things that are unique to itself. So when we give from a place, we often are stirring all of that carbonation, and what we need to do is like a champagne bottle. We need to pop the cork on that top bank of energy, which often requires like dropping the head back. This is what I have people do in class for anxiety. My chest is pinching, I'm caving in. So it's head back. And people make it silly with lion's breath, sticking the tongue out. You can do it with me at home. And we know it's beautiful. It may not be a freshman lesson, but a more junior lesson is to actually have fondness for the uncomfortable sensations in the body when they come. Because thank God they're there. Thank God the anxiety came to let me know that I'm working from a place where I'm devaluing myself or losing my capability to give what I actually have to give. And rather than be so offended by myself for falling into the same trap again, because once you're over 25, you realize that you have patterns.
Right.
So we spend so much time being offended by our own behavior, and then we purchase, and then we have to pay that debt. Mm-hmm. So it's really about like how quickly we can be real with ourselves.
And you know what is also interesting? When I teach in different countries, the cultural, let's say, attitudes of certain behaviors of they don't feel they're worthy enough in certain aspects, where you go to other countries and they have this more I'm powerful confidence. But talk to me about that self-worth, about individuals who are going through that or not feeling they're worthy enough. What would you suggest for someone who feels like a doormat, that they can't seem to stand up for themselves, or they just are a people pleaser or a chameleon, that they can never have a point of view?
Earlier in this conversation, we talked about worry. There's no need to worry, because you're going to do what you need to do on the day that you do it. So any amount of effort to worry about or to game with yourself in a painful or frustrating way about being where you're at. Because like if you want to stop overeating, or over drinking, or over people pleasing, on the day that you do it, that miracle will take place for you, and you will need all of the tools that you have to make that switch for yourself. And we know that switch will take time and presence and continuation. So short of making that decision for yourself is to find enjoyment in the behavior. And I know that sounds weird, and it might not be the right lesson for everybody. I wouldn't say do more of the thing that's not good for you. But one of the ways one of the surest ways to let go of something that is no longer working for us is to come to have fondness for how it was installed as a coping mechanism. Because at one time it served us maybe truly, literally for survival. A lot of people on this planet are struggling with post-traumatic stress from erratic parenting. And I think if we went around the room here or anywhere in life, we would find out that a lot of people have struggled or feel that they did. And it's all relative, because your parents could have been great, or the impression that you received as a child. But I lost my point there. But.
Right, absolutely. No. Who has really been your number one influencer in your life? Who influenced you?
Yeah,
Is it your grandmother?
It was my grandma,
Okay.
my mom, and my dad.
Okay.
Yeah, Grandma Winnie.
Okay, Grandma Winnie.
Grandma Winnie.
Okay. And how?
And she was a fervent Christian woman in the most beautiful way. There was no recruiting or saving, and we would often do Bible trivia. But she would, and I'm thinking of this now. This is what I do in my life as a teacher. I said that in the beginning. You just solved something for me.
Okay.
I take the concept, and then she would put it onto something very real for me as being 11 years old.
Wow.
Talking about some stress I'm feeling at school, and be able to change the vocabulary to get the teaching across. And I noticed that those teachings brought immediate relief.
Excellent. How did you get into Vinyasa Yoga? What was the catalyst?
Yeah, I had sports injuries. I love working out. I was a real strong athlete. I mentioned that earlier. And I had repeat catastrophic injuries. I had torn my hamstring almost off the bone 3 times. I dislocated both shoulders. I was the fastest swimmer in the United States in 1995 in my category. And right at the peak of success, I kept having injury.
What did you swim?
The 50 free.
Oh my God, you were a sprinter.
21:09, but they're like at 17 seconds now.
Oh, I know. The women too.
Yeah, the 14-year-old guys are like, hey.
Wow. So you just injured yourself so much that you found yoga. And yoga is what all the Olympic athletes are asked to do now.
That's right. And I had a dance instructor, Cindera Che. I'm a big fan of hers. She's still a friend. I was 18 years old, and she put her hand on my back, and her hand felt like lava going through my back. And she said, "You're moving too fast." And I didn't know what she meant, but I knew she was right. And I had a big boo-hoo at that moment.
Wow.
And I was outrunning what I perceived to be the pain that I experienced as a kid. And rather than turn to drugs, alcohol, or criminal behavior, I took it into altruism and making sure that every need of every person was met. And to the untrained eye, it was an unfair lesson to learn, because it was coming from a place of hurt and insecurity. But as I aged and became, in my 20s and 30s, that behavior can come across as arrogance. It looks very housewifey to take care of everybody all of the time. And I would often get hurt for overgiving, being like, can't anybody see that this is what I'm doing? And the injuries slowed me down. There's this wonderful book called Body Mind by Ken Dykewald. And he talks about how when there is sports injury or any type of physical injury in the body, it's like a flare gun being shot off to our consciousness. And if we ask a question, for instance, like to my hamstring, you have my attention now. So what are you trying to reveal to me? And your viewers, and you can try it out at home, but I have never had it not be the case. And I've also had students report to me that if truly from the bottom of your heart you ask the question of the pain will tell you. It will show you exactly. My body was showing me that I was trying to stand taller at gay bars. And I was lengthening I was creating back pain, and compensate for back pain, I was overextending on my right leg.
Wow.
All to be seen.
Right.
And I asked that question in my bed, and it unraveled back to that place.
Interesting.
Yeah.
This retreat in Sardinia, you're doing a yoga retreat, September 18th to 26th. You were sold out, but you do have one space available. So anybody from Italy or America, if I had the time, I would book it. I would go. I want to go on one of your retreats. But tell me about what that is going to encompass, being in Sardinia.
What I like to bring the people that are traveling with me is I'm really hands-on, kind of 24 hours a day. So I like to say, if I was chatting like off the cuff, it basically, like if you go to a hotel and you want an avocado sandwich in the middle of the night, that's like $27. So the retreats are always built where people can open the fridge and eat if they're hungry. And we always stay typically in people's homes. So it's a very hands-on experience. It's a high-end experience, welcoming people to have the emotional celebration, the victory, and also the processing that needs to take place if possible, and when necessary, in beautiful locations around the world.
And if they would like to take that one space, they can go to ck2u.com, correct?
CK, the number 2, YOU.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's coming up. So answer these one-word questions for me. The world needs...
Hug.
I believe...
In truth.
Heaven is...
Nobility.
God is...
Present.
My favorite thing to do on a Sunday is...
Not work.
What is your ultimate mission in life?
To help people become emotionally and spiritually aware so that they can use their life in a loving way.
Excellent, Colin. Thank you so much for coming today to the show and being a part of Ready, Set, Live. If all of you would be interested in his Instagram, it's Colin Lee Kim, or you can go to ck2u.com. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gary. It's good to be here.
I'm Gary. Ooh.
It's okay. You can go here.
I'm Gary Quinn. Join me next time for another episode of Ready, Set, Live. Until next time, be well. I forgot where my cameras were. I was like, going, where am I? That was great, Colin.
Thanks, Tony.
Wow, wonderful.